Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into the world of Russian espionage in the U.S. today.
Ah, yes. This should be a good one.
It's crazy to think that these spy tactics we see in movies are actually happening in real life.
It's true.
So, to get us started, you sent over this fascinating Wikipedia article on the topic.
Right.
And, it's one thing to read about it,
Mm,
but it's another to really understand how these tactics are still at play today.
absolutely. And that's what we are going to do today.
So let's set the stage first.
Okay.
When we think about Russian intelligence, most people think of the KGB.
Right. That's kind of the classic image.
The super secret Soviet agency from the Cold War.
Exactly.
But after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991,
Things got a little more complicated.
it wasn't just one big organization anymore.
It's splintered.
So we have the FSB, which is mostly focused on internal security within Russia,
Oh.
the SVR, which handles foreign intelligence,
Yep.
and then, of course, there's the GRU, which is responsible for military intelligence.
Yeah. The GRU, now that's where things get really interesting.
And that's when we hear about the most these days, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. They've been linked to so many major incidents.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, think about the disruption of the Ukrainian power grid, for example,
Hmm.
or that DNC hacking scandal back in 2016.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge deal.
It just goes to show that these agencies are still very active on a global scale.
And their actions have real consequences.
Exactly. And you know what's really important to remember?
What's that?
It's not just about gathering information.
Okay, so what is it about?
There's this great quote from a former KGB Major General, Oleg Kalugin.
Okay.
He said that the heart and soul of Soviet intelligence was actually subversion.
Subversion.
Not just spying, but actively trying to weaken the West, sow discord, undermine the U.S.
So it's about creating instability.
You got it.
So how do they actually do this? What tools do they use?
Well, think of it like a playbook filled with all sorts of dirty tricks.
Oh, I like this analogy. A playbook for messing with people and events.
Exactly. And these are what are known as active measures.
Active measures.
Things like disinformation campaigns, propaganda, deception, sabotage, basically anything that can destabilize a situation.
So basically messing with stuff to get a desired outcome.
And guess what? This playbook is still very much in use today,
Oh, I bet.
but with a modern twist, of course.
Yeah, with the internet and everything, they can spread disinformation so much faster now.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they have this global megaphone now.
Back in the day, they had the Andropov Institute.
Yeah, you know about that.
I've heard of it, yeah.
That was where KGB agents learned how to carry out these active measures.
Like a spy school.
Exactly. And now it's called the Academy of Foreign Intelligence, but the mission is still basically the same.
So this is all very high-level stuff.
Yeah.
But how does it actually affect regular people like us?
Okay, get this.
Okay.
In 2000, a high-ranking Russian spy, Colonel Sergei Tretyakov,
Wait, a Russian spy?
yep, decided to switch sides and defect to the U.S.
He defected. Where was he operating?
right here in New York City.
No way. Like in New York City where people go for vacation.
I know, right? It sounds crazy.
So there were Russian spies operating in New York City.
Tretyakov was in charge of all Russian covert operations in the city and at the United Nations, actually.
So this wasn't just some Cold War relic.
Nope. This was happening right under everyone's noses.
And what were these spies doing?
Well, Tretyakov revealed that they were embedded throughout the city,
Okay.
gathering intelligence and working to influence events.
It's kind of unsettling to think about.
It is, and it gets even more complicated because it's not all James Bond and trench coats.
What do you mean?
Well, Russian intelligence often uses what they call a second echelon of spies.
A second echelon.
Think about it.
Okay.
Legal immigrants, scientists, professionals
Regular people?
who are secretly working as agents.
Wait, so they're using everyday people to gather intel?
They blend in, appear harmless, but they're quietly gathering information.
That's kind of terrifying.
It is pretty wild.
And like, what would they even be doing?
Think about that group of 10 Russian agents who were arrested back in 2010.
Oh, yeah, I remember
They
that.
were part of the illegals program.
Right.
They were living seemingly ordinary American lives.
They were like a suburban family or something.
Exactly. But they were actually trying to build relationships with influential people.
To get access to sensitive information, I bet.
It's a reminder that espionage can take many forms, and the most dangerous spies are often the ones who look just like your neighbors.
That's definitely creepy.
I know, right?
So we've got trained spies and everyday people being roped into this.
Yeah.
But how does this connect to what we see happening in the world today? Like with current events?
Oh, one of the most prominent examples in recent history is Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Oh, yeah. The Mueller report.
That's the
It
one.
was a huge deal.
It was a massive investigation.
And it basically concluded that Russia did interfere in the election.
They didn't necessarily change votes directly, but they tried to influence public opinion and sow discord.
And they used social media as a key weapon, right?
Absolutely. Remember the whole troll farm thing?
The Internet Research Agency.
You're right. They churned out fake accounts and spread disinformation like crazy.
So all those weird Facebook posts and Twitter rants people were sharing.
Could have easily been from Russian trolls.
It's mind-blowing to think about.
They wanted to create chaos and amplify existing divisions.
And influence the election, of course.
And here's the kicker.
What?
Mueller himself said, Russia's foreign election interference wasn't a single attempt. They're doing it as we sit here.
So it's not just a thing of the past.
Nope.
It's ongoing.
And there are even deeper, more chilling theories about Russian influence during that time.
Okay, this is getting really interesting.
We'll dig into those next time.
I can't wait.
So where we left off was this idea that there's more to the story of Russian interference than we might think.
Right, deeper than just troll farms and social media.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting.
Way on me.
There's this former KGB spy named Yuri Shvets,
Okay.
and he has a pretty wild theory.
I love a good conspiracy theory. What's he saying?
He believes that Donald Trump was a cultivated asset for the KGB for decades.
Whoa, hold on. A cultivated asset? Like, they were grooming him
That's what he argued.
for decades. So, like, way before he even got in politics.
Yeah, Shvets even suggests that there might have been a spotter agent who identified Trump as someone they could potentially influence back in the 1980s.
That's a pretty bold claim.
It is.
But is there any evidence to back that up?
Well, Shvets points to Trump's visit to the Soviet Union in 1987.
Right, I remember reading about that.
And right after that trip, Trump took out those full-page newspaper ads criticizing American allies and NATO spending.
Oh, yeah. Those are pretty controversial.
Shvets claims that he actually saw a KGB cable celebrating those ads.
Celebrating them.
Yeah, as a successful active measure.
So basically, they were happy that Trump was echoing their talking points.
Essentially, yeah.
Wow, that's some serious Cold War intrigue right there.
It is.
But, I mean, are we really supposed to believe that Trump was a KGB puppet?
Well, it's important to remember that these are just theories,
Oh,
but they do raise some fascinating questions
falsely.
about the extent of Russian influence operations.
It makes you wonder if there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than we realize.
Exactly. And Schmetz believes that the Mueller report, while thorough, was too focused on criminal activity and missed the bigger picture of counterintelligence.
So basically, he's saying there might be a whole other level to this story that we haven't even uncovered.
That's his argument.
This is getting deep.
It is. And, you know, the 2016 election wasn't an isolated incident.
Oh, right. They interfered in the 2020 election, too, didn't they?
Yep. Although they changed their approach a bit.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, according to a declassified report from the Director of National Intelligence, Russia's goal in 2020 wasn't necessarily about changing votes directly.
Okay, so what were they after?
It was about sowing chaos and undermining confidence in the entire democratic process.
So it wasn't about getting a specific candidate elected.
Not really.
It was about making people question the system itself.
You got it.
That's pretty insidious.
It is. And they were very strategic about it.
Ow.
Instead of relying solely on troll farms and fake accounts,
Yeah.
they leaned heavily on proxies and Trump allies to spread misinformation and unsubstantiated allegations about Biden.
Wait, so they were using Americans to do their dirty work?
Essentially.
Yeah.
That's wild. They understood that information coming from seemingly credible sources would be more impactful.
Even if those sources were pushing false narratives.
Exactly. They were weaponizing the American political landscape itself.
That's a whole other level of manipulation.
It is.
It's like they figured out how to hack the system from within.
And of course, social media remained a key weapon in their arsenal.
Of course.
They used platforms like Facebook and Twitter to amplify political polarization,
Yep. Saw that happening.
spread fake news, fuel conspiracy theories.
It's amazing how much power they wield through social media.
It's true. And it's not just random propaganda. They carefully craft messages to target specific groups,
Really?
exploiting existing divisions and making them even worse.
Give me an example.
Well, for example, in 2016, they tried to discourage African Americans from voting by spreading false information about voting procedures or encouraging them to boycott the election.
Wow, that's messed up.
It is. It's a very calculated approach to information warfare.
So it's not just about spreading chaos.
Nope.
It's about targeting specific groups to sow discord.
You got it. But let's shift gears for a moment.
Okay.
Remember that whole incident where the Trump administration expelled a bunch of Russian spies?
Oh, yeah. That was in 2018, right?
Yep. Right after the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal in the UK.
That was a crazy story.
It was. And 60 Russian diplomats were kicked out of the U.S.
For suspected espionage.
Exactly. It felt like something straight out of the Cold War.
It did. It was a huge diplomatic move.
It was.
And U.S. officials at the time believed there were over 100 Russian spies operating undercover in the U.S.
Can you imagine?
100 spies.
Yeah.
That's wild. But we've been talking a lot about traditional espionage,
Yeah.
secret agents and undercover operations. But hasn't technology changed the game? What about cyber espionage?
You're absolutely right. Cyber espionage has become a major tool for Russian intelligence.
Especially after the Cold War, I bet.
Definitely.
Remember that massive data breach in 2020?
The one where Russian hackers got into U.S. government systems?
Yeah, that was a huge deal.
It was. They got into the Treasury and Commerce departments.
And exposed all sorts of sensitive information.
It was one of the worst cyber attacks the U.S. has ever suffered.
And it wasn't just the government, was it?
Nope. The 2020 attack also targeted private companies.
Like who?
Microsoft and other tech giants.
So basically, now Russian spies can just hack their way into sensitive information from their desks.
Pretty much.
That's both impressive and scary.
It is. It highlights how vulnerable our digital infrastructure is to foreign intelligence services.
This is all starting to feel like an episode of Black Mirror.
I know, right?
Traditional spies, cyber spies, disinformation campaigns, election interference. It's a lot to process.
It is.
It's kind of overwhelming to think about, honestly.
I get it. It's a lot to take in.
It feels like we're living in a real-life spy thriller.
In some ways we are.
So how do we even begin to wrap our heads around all of this? What can we do to protect ourselves? So much to think about. It feels like we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides these days. How can we even know what's real and what's not?
That's the question, isn't it? And that's why it's so important to understand these tactics.
Right, because once you see how it works...
Exactly. The more aware you are of how disinformation works, the better you can spot it.
It's like having a built-in BS detector.
I like that.
So we need to be critical thinkers. Be skeptical of what we see online. Always double-check those sources.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to question things. If something seems too good to be true, or if it makes you really emotional, take a step back.
Right, because that's how they get you.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what's the source? What's their agenda? Who benefits from you believing this?
It's like we have to play this constant game of mental self-defense against these invisible attacks.
That's a good way to put it.
But are there any solutions on a larger scale? Can governments or tech companies do anything to help?
Definitely. Governments can impose sanctions on individuals or organizations involved in these activities, expel diplomats suspected of espionage, and of course, invest heavily in cybersecurity.
Right, to protect critical infrastructure.
Exactly. They need to make it clear that these actions have consequences.
Hit them where it hurts, their wallets, and their ability to operate freely. But what about the tech companies themselves? They control the platforms where all this disinformation spreads. Shouldn't they be doing more?
Oh, they have a huge responsibility here. A huge one. They need to be better at identifying and removing fake accounts, labeling misleading content.
And maybe making it harder for these bad actors to manipulate their algorithms.
Exactly. Some platforms are starting to take some steps, but there's still a long way to go.
It feels like every time they come up with a new safeguard, these spies and trolls find a way around it. It's a constant battle.
It is. But besides being more discerning online, think about the information you're sharing. Are you amplifying sensationalized content without checking if it's true?
Right. We've all been guilty of that at some point.
Be wary of those attention-grabbing headlines. They're designed to provoke a reaction, not necessarily to inform. And diversify your sources of information. Don't just stay in your echo chamber.
Right. Get out of your comfort zone.
Exactly. Expose yourself to different perspectives, even those you might disagree with.
It's easy to get caught in an echo chamber where everyone agrees with you, but maybe that's exactly what these foreign actors want.
A divided and polarized public.
Which makes us weaker as a society.
Precisely. They thrive on chaos and division. It makes it easier for them to achieve their goals.
So it sounds like Russian espionage in the U.S. is complex. It's multifaceted, and it's still very much active today.
And it affects us all, whether we realize it or not.
It's a reminder that we can't take our freedom and democracy for granted. We need to be vigilant, informed, engaged citizens to protect them.
Well said.
This has been a fascinating and, frankly, a little bit scary deep dive into the world of Russian espionage. Definitely given me a lot to think about.
Hopefully, it will encourage everyone to keep learning and exploring this topic. The more we know, the better prepared we'll be.
Absolutely. So on that note, we'll wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay vigilant.